Listen, what I'm about to tell you about distancing from your wife will sound like manipulation at first, like some kind of psychological game, but if you understand the deeper mechanism I'm revealing here, you'll realize this isn't about tricks or punishment, but about resetting a dynamic that's been slowly poisoning your relationship for years. There's a biological reality to how women process emotional distance, a predictable sequence of phases that unfolds when a man finally stops being constantly available, constantly agreeable, constantly present, and most men are so terrified of conflict, so desperate to keep peace, that they never discover this powerful truth that could save their marriage. You want to know when a woman starts to miss you after you create distance. It's not hours, not days, it takes weeks minimum, sometimes months, and there are 5 distinct phases she goes through, each one more intense than the last, each one requiring you to maintain frame in ways that will test every fibre of your being. But before I break down these phases, you need to understand why distancing works, what it triggers in her brain, and why most men fail catastrophically when they try it because they have no idea what they're actually doing. The first phase is anger, pure and simple, and this is where 99% of men crack like eggs. She notices you're different, you're not as available, not as sweet, not jumping to fulfill her every need, and her first thought isn't, "Oh no, I'm losing him," it's "How dare he treat me like this?" If your relationship has what I call margin of safety, meaning you haven't had major conflicts recently, this anger stays internal. She stews on it, processes it privately. But if you're already on thin ice, brother, this is when the nuclear bombs start dropping. Threats of divorce, packing bags, calling her mother, posting cryptic messages on social media about knowing your worth. I've seen it countless times. Men try distancing after reading some article online. They pull back for maybe 48 hours. She gets angry, starts making threats, and they immediately cave, apologize, go back to being the lapdog they were before. What they don't understand is that this anger is necessary. It's the first step in a biochemical process that literally changes how her brain perceives you. When you reconcile during the anger phase, you've just reinforced that her emotions control you, that a little pressure makes you fold, that you're exactly as weak as she suspected. You see, yes, women's brains are wired to test male strength, not consciously but biologically, and when you fail these tests by caving to anger, something dies in her perception of you that can never be fully resurrected. But when you maintain distance through her anger, something fascinating happens. She starts to question herself instead of questioning you. Maybe I pushed too far. Maybe I've been taking him for granted. Maybe he has options I didn't know about. This self-reflection is impossible while you're constantly available, because availability breeds contempt. That is the harsh truth nobody wants to admit. Time and again, I watch men destroy their relationships by being too present, too eager, too accommodating. They think love means constant togetherness, constant communication, constant validation, but what they're actually creating is suffocation. And suffocated people don't feel love, they feel trapped. When you distance correctly, you're giving her space to actually miss you, to remember why she chose you, to feel the absence of something she's been taking for granted. But here's where it gets complex and where most relationship advice fails completely. Not all women respond to distance the same way, and if you don't understand which type of woman you're with, distancing can backfire spectacularly. There are fundamentally 2 types of women when it comes to relationship dynamics, and they're as different as fire and water. First type values stability, loyalty, family, building something lasting. Second type values excitement, novelty, attention, constant stimulation. The first type will respond to distance by reflecting and eventually pursuing reconciliation. The second type will respond to distance by immediately seeking attention elsewhere. Many people experience this confusion where they apply distancing to the wrong type of woman and wonder why she's suddenly on dating apps or flirting with co-workers instead of missing them. Brother, if your woman is the type who posts thirst traps on Instagram, who maintains friendships with ex-boyfriends, who needs constant validation from multiple sources, distancing won't make her miss you, it'll make her replace you. You need to know who you're dealing with before you employ this strategy. Let me tell you exactly how I learned this lesson in the most painful way possible. I was with this woman, absolutely beautiful, successful, everything looked perfect from the outside, but I noticed I was always the one initiating contact, always the one planning dates, always the one saying I love you first. so I decided to pull back, create some distance, see if she'd step up. First week, nothing. Second week, she's posting more on social media, lots of selfies, lots of living my best life captions. Third week, mutual friend tells me she's been texting with her ex. That's when I realised my fundamental error. I was trying to increase my value to someone who didn't value value, if that makes sense. She was driven by novelty, by attention, by the validation of multiple men wanting her. My distance didn't make her miss me, it made her seek new supply. Some women, and you need to accept this brutal truth, some women are so damaged by modern culture, by social media, by the endless options presented to them, that they've lost the ability to form deep bonds. They're emotional nomads, always moving to the next source of stimulation. But when you're with a woman who has the capacity for real connection, who values building over consuming, distancing works like magic, and I mean that literally. It's almost supernatural how predictable the phases are. After the anger phase, which typically lasts anywhere from 3 days to 2 weeks, depending on her temperament and your relationship history, she enters what I call the transition phase. During transition, the anger fades, but she's not ready to reach out yet. She's processing, evaluating, weighing her options. This is when she starts remembering good times, missing your presence, feeling the emptiness where you used to be. But she's also proud, stubborn, waiting to see if you'll crack first. This phase is torture for both of you, but it's necessary for resetting the power dynamic that's been skewed for however long you've been over-available. The third phase is where things get interesting, the Reproachment phase, where she starts making small gestures toward reconnection. Maybe she sends a funny meme, asks a practical question about something irrelevant, creates an excuse to contact you. These aren't real attempts at reconciliation. They're tests to see if you're still angry, if you're receptive, if the door is open. Most men, starved for her attention after weeks of distance, jump on these breadcrumbs like starving dogs, immediately returning to full availability, destroying all the value they've built through absence. It happens more often than people realise that men who successfully navigate the first 3 phases completely destroy everything in phase 4, the provocation phase. This is where she tests your boundaries with calculated provocations, sometimes positive, like being extra sweet or sexual, sometimes negative, like picking fights or making jealousy plays. She's measuring your reactions, seeing if you've really changed or if this distance was just a temporary tantrum. I watched my friend navigate this perfectly with his wife of 10 years. They'd fallen into that roommate syndrome so many marriages devolve into no passion, no romance, just logistics and irritation. He implemented strategic distance, not harsh, not cruel, just less available, less eager, more focused on his own life. First month was hell. She was furious, accused him of having an affair, threatened counselling or divorce. He stayed calm, said he was just focusing on some personal goals, needed some space to think. Second month she started coming round, little gestures, cooking his favourite meals, wearing lingerie to bed, but also testing with provocations, mentioning how a co-worker asked her out, how maybe they should consider opening the marriage. He didn't take the bait, didn't get jealous, didn't get excited by the sexual advances, just remained pleasantly neutral, friendly but not eager. By the third month she was fully pursuing him, had completely restructured how she saw him, started treating him like she did when they were dating. But here's the critical point that determines success or failure. The dosage of distance has to be almost imperceptible, like medicine where too little does nothing but too much kills the patient. You don't announce, "I'm distancing myself from you." You don't make dramatic declarations about needing space. You don't suddenly become cold and hostile. You just gradually become less available, less eager, less predictable. You develop interests that don't include her. You stop dropping everything when she calls. You delay responses to texts. You make plans that don't revolve around her schedule. The timing of when you implement distance is absolutely crucial. Most men wait until after a huge fight, when emotions are already explosive, when she's already considering leaving. That's like trying to perform surgery during an earthquake. The ideal time to create distance is when things are relatively calm but stagnant. When you've noticed the respect dropping but haven't reached crisis point yet. If you wait until she's already got one foot out the door, distance won't make her miss you, it'll make her feel relieved. You see, yes, there's a biological component to how distance affects attraction that most people don't understand. When someone is constantly available, our brains categorize them as secured resources, like the air we breathe or the water from our tap, essential but not exciting, valuable but not precious. When that same resource becomes scarce, suddenly our brain recalculates its value. This isn't conscious manipulation, it's hardwired survival psychology that's been evolving for millions of years. But modern men have been programmed to believe that constant availability equals love, that being a good husband means having no life outside your wife, no interests she doesn't share, no boundaries she can't cross. This programming is literally killing marriages because it removes all mystery, all challenge, all reason for a woman to continue choosing you instead of just assuming you'll always be there. I remember talking to this older gentleman, married 45 years, still clearly in love with his wife, and I asked him his secret. He said something that seemed counterintuitive at the time but makes perfect sense now. He said, "I never let her feel like she completely has me. Even after 4 decades, she knows I'm choosing to be with her, not staying because I have nowhere else to go. I maintain friendships she's not part of, hobbies she doesn't share, parts of myself that remain mine alone. She does the same. We choose each other daily instead of assuming each other permanently. That is the essence of strategic distancing. It's not about playing games or creating fake scarcity. It's about maintaining enough independence that your presence remains a choice rather than an obligation, a gift rather than an entitlement. When a woman feels like she owns you completely, she stops valuing you. When she feels like she needs to continually earn your presence, she never stops appreciating it. The practical implementation requires incredible self-control, because every instinct will scream at you to reconcile quickly, to restore harmony, to make her happy again. But her happiness isn't your responsibility, and more importantly, her temporary unhappiness with your distance is necessary for long-term relationship health. It's like surgery. It hurts during the procedure but heals the underlying disease. Many people experience the mistake of overdosing on distance, going from completely available to completely absent, from constant affection to cold indifference. This doesn't create attraction, it creates confusion and resentment. The distance should be subtle enough that she questions whether it's real or just her imagination, consistent enough that she can't dismiss it as a bad mood, strategic enough that it forces her to pursue without feeling abandoned. Time and again, I see men fail because they lack the emotional fortitude to maintain distance when she starts pursuing. She makes one romantic gesture, shows up in lingerie, initiates sex, and suddenly he's back to being a puppy dog. All the mysterious distance evaporated in an instant of validation. This is like a recovering alcoholic celebrating sobriety with a drink. It destroys all progress and reinforces the old dynamic. The correct response to her pursuit isn't cold rejection, but warm uncertainty. You appreciate her efforts, but don't immediately return to full availability. You enjoy the intimacy, but maintain your independent activities. You're present when you're with her, but not constantly accessible when you're apart. This creates what I call dynamic tension. She never quite knows where she stands, which keeps her engaged, interested, pursuing. But let's talk about the really difficult cases, the relationships that are so far gone that normal distancing won't work. When contempt has replaced respect, when she's already emotionally checked out, when she's maybe even already exploring other options. In these cases, you're not planning for weeks or months of distance, you're planning for years. You're not trying to save this relationship, you're preparing for the next one while learning everything you can from this failure. I've counseled men who spent 2 years in strategic distance, not to punish their wives, but to rebuild themselves into men worth missing. They focused on physical fitness, career advancement, personal interests, male friendships, spiritual growth. Their wives noticed, of course, but by then these men had transformed so completely that reconciliation would have required the wife to match their new level, not drag them back to the old dynamic. Some of these marriages were saved, transformed into something unrecognizable from what they were before. Others ended, but the men were so improved that they attracted better partners immediately. Either way, the distancing served its purpose. It broke the toxic dynamic and created space for something better to emerge, whether with the same woman or someone new. The biggest mistake men make is thinking distancing is about her, about making her miss you, about manipulating her emotions. It's not. It's about you reclaiming your masculine frame, your independence, your sense of self that got lost in the relationship. When you distance correctly, you're not punishing her, you're finding yourself. The fact that this often makes her miss you is a byproduct, not the purpose. You want to know the brutal truth about why distancing is so necessary in modern relationships? Because modern men have been trained to be emotional servants, constantly monitoring their woman's moods, constantly adjusting to keep her happy, constantly sacrificing their own needs to maintain peace. This creates a dynamic where the woman becomes the emotional center of the relationship, while the man becomes a satellite orbiting around her feelings. Distancing breaks this orbit, forces you to find your own center, your own emotional gravity that doesn't depend on her approval or happiness. This is terrifying for most men because they've built their entire identity around being a good husband, which they've defined as someone who always puts his wife first, always prioritizes her needs, always seeks her approval. When you distance, you have to face who you are without that identity, and many men discover they don't know. I went through this myself in my last serious relationship. I'd become so enmeshed with her that I didn't know where I ended and she began. My hobbies were our hobbies, my friends were our friends, my plans were our plans. When I started distancing, I had to relearn how to be alone, how to make decisions without considering her reaction, how to enjoy things without sharing them with her. It was like learning to walk again after being in a wheelchair. But here's what happened that I didn't expect. As I became more independent, more self-contained, more comfortable with my own company, she became more interested in me than she'd been in years. Not because I was playing some game, but because I was becoming someone worth being interested in again. The man she fell in love with had returned, the one with his own thoughts, own goals, own life that she could be part of but not control. The phases of her missing you aren't just emotional states she passes through, they're tests of your resolve, your frame, your commitment to maintaining healthy boundaries. Each phase presents opportunities to fail, to return to the old dynamic, to give up your newfound independence for the comfort of familiar dysfunction. The men who succeed are the ones who understand that temporary discomfort is the price of long-term relationship health. It's common to notice that women who've become accustomed to controlling their husbands react to distancing with extreme measures. They'll create emergencies that require your immediate attention. They'll have emotional breakdowns that need your support. They'll make threats that demand your response. These are all tests, conscious or unconscious, to see if the distance is real or just another temporary mood that she can wait out or break through. The response to these tests determines everything. If you come running every time she creates a crisis, you've just taught her that manufacturing drama is the way to get your attention. If you maintain distance even through her provocations, she learns that you've truly changed, that the old buttons don't work anymore, that she needs to find new ways to connect with you that don't involve manipulation or control. But here's the paradox that breaks most men's brains. The less you care about whether she misses you, the more likely she is to miss you. When you're genuinely focused on your own growth, your own interests, your own life, the distance becomes natural rather than strategic. You're not playing a game, you're living your life, and she can either be part of that life or not, but you're no longer organizing everything around her participation. This requires a fundamental shift in how you see relationships, from something you need to something you choose, from your source of validation to one aspect of a complete life. When your wife realizes she's optional, rather than essential to your happiness, paradoxically she becomes more committed to being essential. But this only works if the distance comes from genuine independence, not manipulative tactics. The timing of her phases depends on so many variables: her age, her options, her attachment style, her relationship history, whether you have children, how long you've been together, how badly the dynamic has deteriorated. A woman in her 20s with no kids and lots of options might take months to move through the phases. A woman in her 40s with 3 kids and a mortgage might move through them in weeks. But regardless of timing, the phases remain consistent: anger, transition, reproachment, provocation, and finally, genuine pursuit. Your job isn't to rush these phases, but to remain steady through all of them, neither pulling her closer nor pushing her further away, just maintaining your frame while she figures out how to relate to this new version of you. Some men ask me, what if she never misses me? What if the distance just leads to permanent separation? And my answer is always the same. Then the relationship was already dead and distance just revealed the truth. You can't make someone miss you who doesn't value you. You can't create attraction where none exists. All you can do is become the best version of yourself and see if that version is someone she wants to be with. The hardest truth about distancing is that it might reveal that your marriage is unsalvageable, that the contempt is too deep, the resentment too strong, the incompatibility too fundamental. But even in these cases, distance serves a purpose. It prepares you for life after this relationship, teaches you to be alone, builds the independence you'll need to attract someone better suited to you. That is the real power of strategic distancing. It either saves your relationship by resetting unhealthy dynamics, or it prepares you for a better relationship by building your independence and self-worth. Either outcome is better than continuing in a dynamic where you're constantly available, constantly undervalued, constantly trying to earn love that should be freely given. The implementation requires patience that most modern men don't possess, conditioned as we are to instant gratification, immediate results, quick fixes. Distancing is a long game, measured in months and years rather than days and weeks. It's not about winning a battle, but changing the entire nature of the war. It's not about making her miss you once, but creating a dynamic where your presence remains valuable, because it's never guaranteed. Every man reading this or listening to this who's considering distancing needs to understand. This isn't a technique you try for a few weeks to see if it works. This is a fundamental restructuring of how you approach relationships, a complete revision of your availability, your boundaries, your sense of self. It requires you to become comfortable with conflict, with uncertainty, with the possibility of loss. But the alternative, continuing to orbit around her emotions, continuing to sacrifice yourself for peacekeeping, continuing to be taken for granted, that's not a relationship. It's a slow death of everything masculine within you. The choice is yours. Continue being constantly available, constantly accommodating, constantly undervalued, or begin the difficult process of strategic distancing, of reclaiming your independence, of becoming someone worth missing. The phases will unfold exactly as I've described, the tests will come exactly as I've predicted, and your response will determine whether your relationship transforms or ends. Either way, you'll emerge stronger, more independent, more valuable than you are right now, in your current state of constant availability. That is the truth about distancing from your wife. It's not about manipulation or games or punishment. It's about becoming a complete man again, one who chooses rather than needs, who maintains rather than sacrifices, who creates rather than just responds. And when you become that man, whether she misses you or not becomes less important than the fact that you've become someone worth missing.